Hidden deep in the misty hills of Virginia, the town of Ashwood thrived on simplicity and familiarity. It was a place where everyone knew each other, where children played freely in the streets, and where rumors spread faster than the wind. Strangers rarely visited, and the townspeople preferred it that way. They took pride in their close-knit community, where life moved to a slow, predictable rhythm. But beneath the town's peaceful surface, shadows stirred whispers of something darker lurking just beyond the edges of their perception. It would take a tragic event to reveal that not all secrets in Ashwood stayed buried. It all began with a disappearance, one that was subtle but unsettling. Emily Carter, a 30-year-old woman known for her devotion to St. Michael's Church, failed to show up for Sunday service. Emily was a fixture at the church. She organized activities for the children, brought food to the elderly, and tended to the church garden long after evening prayers had ended. Her absence that morning was like a sudden chill in the air, a feeling that something was terribly wrong. The congregation murmured among themselves, casting worried glances at the empty pew where she usually sat. When Emily didn't answer her phone, a few concerned friends decided to check on her at home. They found her cottage at the edge of town with the door slightly ajar. Inside, the lights were on, a cup of tea sat untouched on the counter, and the television played softly in the background. The scene was eerily still, as if Emily had stepped out for just a moment and never returned. But there was no sign of a struggle, no evidence of where she might have gone. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. As the sun began to set, worry turned into panic. Neighbors gathered at the church hall, forming search parties that combed through the dense woods and winding paths that surrounded Ashwood. Flashlights cut through the evening fog, voices called out Emily's name, growing more desperate with each unanswered echo. People clung to the hope that she would turn up with a simple explanation, but deep down, a sense of dread took root in the town's collective heart. 3 days later, their worst fears were realized. Hidden in a small, dusty room behind the main chapel of St. Michael's, Emily's lifeless body was found. Her face was bruised, her hands bore marks of a struggle, and there was a cut across her temple that told of a violent end. But the most chilling detail was the small, blood-stained cross placed beside her, positioned as if in a mockery of a prayer. To the townspeople, it was unthinkable that such a horrific act could occur in their place of worship, a sanctuary that had always been a symbol of hope and solace. The news spread like wildfire, and soon the entire town was gripped by fear and confusion. How could something so violent and profane happen in a place where they had always felt safe? How could evil have crept into their town unnoticed? In a place where trust had been the foundation of their community, suspicion now grew, twisting its way into the thoughts of even the most steadfast residents. Detectives Laura Brooks and Ethan Cole arrived from the nearby county to lead the investigation. Laura, with her sharp eyes and relentless drive, had made a name for herself solving cases that seemed unsolvable. Her partner, Ethan, brought years of experience and a talent for reading people, for drawing out the truths hidden behind their guarded words. As they walked through Ashwood's quiet streets, they could feel the tension that crackled in the air, the way the residents now watched each other with a mix of fear and suspicion. Their first encounter with the crime scene left them both unsettled. Despite the brutality of Emily's death, the room where she was found was strangely tidy. There were no overturned chairs, no broken glass, no signs of a struggle, save for the wounds on Emily's body. Laura couldn't shake the feeling that the scene had been staged, that the killer had gone to great lengths to control how Emily was found. The blood-stained cross beside her seemed almost like a taunt, a twisted challenge left behind by someone who believed they were above suspicion. As they began to question Emily's friends and neighbors, Laura and Ethan learned that she had recently seemed troubled, as if burdened by a secret she couldn't share. She had grown distant, avoiding conversations she once relished, and those closest to her noticed that her once bright smile had faded into something more uncertain. Some of the townspeople spoke of how Emily had been spending more time alone with Father Samuel Turner, the priest who had led St. Michael's Church for over 15 years. Father Samuel, a tall, austere man with a voice that could soothe or command as needed, had been a pillar of the community for as long as anyone could remember. He was known for his impassioned sermons, his unyielding sense of right and wrong, and his willingness to offer guidance to anyone who sought it. But in recent months, some noticed a shift in his demeanor. His sermons had taken on a darker tone, speaking more of sin and punishment than of redemption and grace. Some found his words inspiring, others felt a chill in the intensity of his beliefs. When questioned about Emily, Father Samuel admitted that she had come to him on the night of her disappearance. She had seemed troubled, he said, seeking spiritual guidance about something she had discovered. But he insisted that she left the church of her own accord and that he had spent the rest of the evening in prayer. His calm, almost rehearsed demeanor during the interview made Laura uneasy. Was he hiding something, or was he simply a man struggling to maintain his composure in the face of a tragedy that struck so close to his church? As the investigation deepened, Laura and Ethan found themselves drawn into a web of contradictions and hidden truths. The church's financial records revealed unexplained withdrawals, large sums of money that had been transferred to a private account. Their search led them to Clara Hayes, a former parishioner who had moved away years ago, leaving behind a cloud of rumors about her troubled past. The account to which the funds had been transferred was in her name, but it was her son, Victor Hayes, who now controlled it. Victor, a man with a reputation for violence and a history of minor crimes, had recently returned to Ashwood, moving into a dilapidated trailer on the outskirts of town. His name had been whispered in connection with bar fights and thefts, and his reappearance in town had stirred old resentments among the townspeople. Ethan tracked down Victor and brought him in for questioning, hoping to find a connection between him and Emily's death. At first, Victor denied any involvement, insisting that he barely knew Emily. But when Ethan confronted him with surveillance footage showing his car parked outside St. Michael's on the night of her disappearance, Victor's story began to change. He admitted that he had met with Father Samuel that night but claimed that the priest had asked him to scare Emily into silence. According to Victor, Father Samuel feared that Emily had discovered something that could ruin his reputation, though he never explained what that might be. The implications of Victor's claims were troubling. Had Father Samuel manipulated Victor, using his troubled past as leverage? Or was Victor using the priest as a scapegoat, trying to shift the blame for a crime he had committed? Laura and Ethan found themselves questioning their assumptions about both men, wondering if either of them could be trusted. As the investigation progressed, Laura uncovered Emily's hidden diary, tucked beneath a loose floorboard in her bedroom. The diary was filled with entries that revealed a woman who had grown increasingly paranoid, convinced that someone was watching her. Emily wrote of late-night visits to the church, where she would speak with Father Samuel about her fears and doubts. She described a growing sense of unease, a feeling that she had uncovered something she wasn't meant to see. One entry stood out: "He knows that I know. But I can't stay silent. If I don't do this, who will? I just hope I'm wrong about him." The words seemed to point directly to Father Samuel, but Laura knew that Emily's fear could have clouded her judgment. There was also mention of a mysterious figure. Emily wrote about a man who had approached her outside the church, warning her to mind her own business. The description fit Victor, but Laura couldn't shake the feeling that there might be more to the story than either man was letting on. With the diary as leverage, Laura and Ethan confronted Father Samuel again, and this time his composure began to crack. He admitted that Emily had discovered financial records that exposed his involvement in a money laundering scheme. Desperate to protect the church and his reputation, Father Samuel had asked Victor to intimidate Emily. But he swore he never intended for her to be harmed. "I thought he would scare her, not this," he stammered, his voice breaking for the first time since the investigation began. Victor, however, refused to take full responsibility. Under pressure, he admitted that he had confronted Emily, but claimed that she had attacked him first, leaving him with no choice but to defend himself. Laura and Ethan saw through his lies, but it was clear that both men had been complicit in Emily's death, each driven by their own desperation to keep their secrets hidden. The trial of Father Samuel Turner and Victor Hayes was a spectacle that drew crowds from across the county. In the courthouse, the townspeople listened in stunned silence as the sordid details of the case were laid bare: Father Samuel's financial misdeeds, Victor's history of violence, and the tragic fate that had befallen Emily. Father Samuel was sentenced to 20 years in prison for conspiracy and fraud, while Victor received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for Emily's murder. But even as the gavel fell, it was clear that the town of Ashwood would never be the same. St. Michael's Church, once a place of sanctuary and solace, now stood as a reminder of broken trust and shattered faith. The stained glass windows, once vibrant with depictions of hope and salvation, seemed to cast darker shadows over the empty pews. Parishioners who had once looked to Father Samuel for guidance now avoided the church altogether, unable to reconcile the man they had trusted with the crimes he had committed. Laura Brooks and Ethan Cole returned to their work, but the case lingered in their minds like a shadow that refused to lift. For Laura, it was a stark reminder that even those who preach virtue can harbor darkness, and that evil often wears the face of righteousness. Ethan found himself haunted by how easily trust could be shattered, how quickly a community could be torn apart by secrets that festered just beneath the surface. As winter settled over Ashwood, snow covered the old churchyard, turning the town into a quiet, frozen landscape. Emily Carter's grave became a place of quiet reflection, a reminder of the fragility of life and the price of truth. Some residents left, unable to bear the weight of the memories that lingered in every corner. Others stayed, determined to rebuild what had been lost, to find a way to trust again. But the story of Emily, of Father Samuel's betrayal and Victor's violence, lingered like a scar that would never fully fade. For those who remained, the lesson was clear: evil can find its way into even the most peaceful places, and the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to the surface. And though the town of Ashwood would try to move on, the shadows of what had happened there would haunt them for years to come, a reminder that darkness often hides where it is least expected.